Hello, I'm Clyde. If this is your first time wandering into one of my little adventures, you can think of me as someone who travels around, mostly to places where not much happens. I tend to sit. I wait. I watch things age very slowly. Paint, dust, bread, clocks, weather, that sort of thing. I have an entire playlist filled with these boring journeys, all tucked neatly together. So if you ever want to drift through them later, they'll be there waiting. You don't need to remember them right now. They don't mind being forgotten for a while. Before you get too comfortable, though, this is the moment where I gently remind you to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you'd think, and it saves you from remembering later when you're already half asleep and wondering why your thumb feels heavy. And if you ever decide to become a channel member, you're helping keep these quiet little stories going. And you can even ask me to tell you a personalized, sleepy story of your own. Something slow, something uneventful, something that doesn't ask very much of you at all. Now that that's settled, we can sit. I'm in the upper balcony of a forgotten opera house. One of those grand ones that used to matter very much and now mostly matters to pigeons and dust. The kind with too many seats and not enough people left to fill them. The kind where the air always smells faintly like old fabric, old wood, and the idea of applause. The cushion beneath me is stiff and gritty. It might once have been red velvet, or green, or something between the two. I decide it's velvet anyway. Pretending helps. The springs beneath it give a tired sigh when I shift my weight, like they've been holding someone else up for a century and are relieved it's not their job anymore. Above me, the ceiling stretches wide and curved, painted with faded clouds and soft angels who look as though they've forgotten why they're flying. The paint has begun to crack. Not dramatically, just politely. Thin lines spreading slowly like the beginning of a thought that never quite finishes. That's what I'm watching. The cracks don't hurry. They never have. Down below, rows of empty seats curve around the stage. A few hats have been left behind over the years, one with a crushed brim, another with feathers that have lost interest in being feathers. There's a single glove on the floor, fingers curled inward as if it's holding on to something invisible. Maybe it applauded once and never quite stopped. Somewhere near the orchestra pit, a cat sleeps. I didn't notice it at first. Cats are very good at being unnoticeable when they want to be. It's gray, with one ear folded slightly the wrong way, and it has chosen a spot where the light from a broken chandelier warms the floor just enough. Every now and then its tail flicks as if it's conducting a dream. The opera house is quiet, but not empty. There's a man down below sweeping the aisle with a broom that has lost most of its bristles. He sweeps slowly, stopping often to lean on the handle and look up at the ceiling, possibly at the same cracks I'm watching, or possibly at nothing at all. It's hard to tell from this distance. He hums sometimes, off-key, and then forgets the tune halfway through. That happens a lot here. This place once heard arias, orchestras, thunderous applause. It hosted composers who argued passionately about tempo and singers who drank too much tea and too little water. At some point, depending on when you decide this is, gas lights were replaced with electricity, corsets loosened, hats got smaller, and the applause became less certain. Right now, though, the loudest sound is dust settling. I lean back slightly and feel the wooden rail beneath my fingers. It's rough in places, worn smooth in others, shaped by hands that waited through long performances and shorter intermissions. Someone once carved their initials here. They didn't do a very good job. The letters wobble. I like that. I tell myself I'm here to watch the paint crack. That's the official reason. Unofficially, I think I'm just enjoying how nothing is asking me to move. The ceiling gives a faint creak. The cat shifts. Somewhere far outside, a carriage goes by, or maybe a car. The sound doesn't seem interested in explaining itself. I keep watching the cracks. They don't do anything exciting. They never do. And that's exactly why I stay. I didn't plan to sit here this long. I never do. I always think I'll watch something for a minute or two. Maybe notice a crack widen, maybe see a bit of dust fall. And then I'll stand up, stretch, wander somewhere else. That's usually how it goes, or how I expect it to go, but expectations don't carry much weight in places like this. The ceiling above me was once meant to impress people. You can tell. The kind of careful curve that suggests someone stood back and said, "Yes, this will do," and then said it again just to be sure. The paint is layered. You can see hints of older colors beneath the topmost one, like the building tried on different moods over the years and never quite settled on a favorite. One of the cracks runs just past the painted hand of an angel. The fingers are stretched outward, frozen in the middle of a gesture that probably meant something symbolic once. Now it mostly looks like it's reaching for the crack, curious about how it got there. I imagine the painter, whoever they were, lying on their back on a scaffold, neck sore, arms tired, wondering if anyone would ever really look this closely. They probably hoped so. People always do, but they don't usually plan on waiting this long for it. Below me, the man with the broom stops sweeping again. He squints at something on the floor. A program, folded and unfolded so many times, it's more air than paper now. He nudges it with the toe of his shoe as if hoping it will explain itself. It doesn't. He sighs, folds it once more for no particular reason, and tucks it into his pocket. I doubt he'll ever read it. Some things just like being carried. The cat wakes briefly, opens one eye, decides the world is still acceptable, and goes back to sleep. Its whiskers twitch as if it's remembering music that isn't being played anymore. Cats remember things differently. They don't hold on to dates or names. Just warmth and quiet in places where nothing sudden happens. That's something this opera house still does very well. Once, this place would have been buzzing long before a performance. Ladies adjusting gloves, gentlemen pretending not to be nervous, someone rushing in late, whispering apologies that weren't really meant to be heard. The orchestra warming up, that soft chaos of sound where every instrument seems to be arguing politely with the others. If this were the late 1800s, there'd be gas lights glowing and the faint smell of fuel mixing with perfume. If it were the early 1900s, electric bulbs would flicker a bit, still new enough to be distrusted. Ushers would be standing straighter than they needed to, proud of their uniforms, secretly counting the minutes until intermission. Right now, there's just dust. A flake of paint finally lets go somewhere above me. It doesn't fall straight down. It drifts, spins slightly, catches the air like it's reconsidering its decision. It lands on the back of an empty seat a few rows below and settles in as if it's always belonged there. I watch where it lands and then forget exactly where it is. That happens too. My foot nudges something near my seat, an old opera glass. The lenses are cloudy, the leather cracked, the hinge loose. I lift it carefully, as if it might be offended by rough handling after all this time. When I peer through it, the ceiling looks even farther away, which feels unnecessary, but polite. I lower it again and set it beside me. There's a faint draft, the kind that sneaks through old buildings without making any announcements. It smells like damp stone and old curtains and something faintly metallic. Maybe from the stage machinery below. Once, sets would have risen and fallen there, ropes creaking, counterweights clanking, entire worlds lifted into place and then removed again before anyone could get too attached. The man with the broom finally resumes sweeping. Each stroke is slow, careful, almost ceremonial. He's not trying to finish. He's just moving dust from one place to another, which feels appropriate somehow. I lean forward slightly, resting my arms on my knees. The crack above me hasn't grown. Or maybe it has, just not enough to brag about it. I try to remember how it looked when I first sat down, but the memory slides away gently, like it doesn't want to be pinned down. That's all right. Somewhere in the building, something ticks. Not loudly, not insistently. just enough to be noticed if you're listening for it. I decide not to figure out what it is. It could be a clock. It could be something expanding and contracting with the temperature. It could be pretending to be important. I let it tick. I keep watching the ceiling. Nothing happens, which is exactly what I came here for. I start to notice how much this place likes holding on to things. Not the important things. Not the names of the singers or the dates of the performances or which opera brought the house to its feet. Those details tend to drift away first. They're lighter, easier to lose. What stays behind are the smaller objects. There's a scarf tucked between two seats a few rows down, its fringe tangled, the fabric faded into a color that no longer has a name. It looks like it was forgotten deliberately, as if someone meant to come back for it but didn't want to feel rushed about it. I imagine them standing up at the end of a performance, applauding politely, already thinking about the walk home, the weather, the taste of tea waiting somewhere else. They probably assumed the scarf would wait. And it did. Near the railing beside me, someone long ago scratched a small drawing into the wood. It might be a horse, or a dog, or possibly a very determined loaf of bread. The lines are shallow, worn smooth by years of hands passing over them without noticing. I run my thumb along it once, then stop. Touching things too much makes them feel observed, and I don't want to interrupt whatever quiet arrangement this place has worked out with itself. The man with the broom finishes his sweep of the aisle and leans the broom against a seat. He pulls a handkerchief from his pocket and wipes his forehead, though it's not particularly warm. The movement feels more habitual than necessary, something he's done 1,000 times, whether there was sweat there or not. He glances up toward the balcony, not directly at me, just generally upward, toward the ceiling, toward the idea of the upper seats. His eyes linger for a moment, then move on. I don't think he's ever really looked up here. Or if he has, it was long enough ago that the memory has softened into something unimportant. That's all right. People don't usually come to opera houses to look at the balconies once they're empty. Somewhere backstage, a rope creaks. It's a deep, tired sound, like something stretching after a very long nap. I picture old stagehands moving sets by muscle memory alone, calling out cues that echo faintly even now. Left a little. No, too much. Hold it there. That's fine. It's always fine. I shift in my seat and a small puff of dust lifts into the air. It sparkles briefly in the light before deciding it's had enough excitement for one day and settling back down. Dust is very good at knowing when to stop. If this were the early days of cinema, when silent films sometimes borrowed opera houses for screenings, there might have been a projector humming softly somewhere, flickering images dancing across the stage. People would have sat forward, unsure what to do with their hands, clapping at strange moments, laughing a little too late. The opera house would have tolerated it. It seems like the kind of building that doesn't mind being repurposed as long as no one expects it to explain itself. The cat wakes again and stretches this time, back arching, paws extending one by one as if testing the floor for reliability. It hops down from its warm patch and pads slowly along the aisle, tail held high, inspecting the seats as if considering which one might still be suitable. It stops beneath the balcony, looks up briefly, not at me exactly, but in my direction, and then loses interest. Cats are efficient that way. I lean my head back and return my attention to the ceiling. The cracks look different now, or maybe I'm just seeing them from a slightly altered angle. One of them branches off unexpectedly, forming a delicate little fork, like it changed its mind mid-thought. I wonder how long it took to get that way. Years, probably. Maybe decades. There's no rush. I realize I've been breathing in time with the distant ticking sound without meaning to. In, out, pause, in again. The rhythm settles in comfortably, like it's always been there, just waiting for me to notice. I stay still. The opera house doesn't ask anything of me. It just keeps holding on. There's a moment in every performance, or at least there used to be, when the curtain fell and everyone stood up at once, stretching their legs, pretending they hadn't been sitting perfectly still for far too long. Intermission. People liked intermission. It gave them something to do that wasn't listening, something to hold, a program to reread, a glass to sip, a chance to comment quietly about the soprano's breathing or the tenor's shoes. Sometimes the comments were thoughtful. More often they were just there to fill the space. This opera house still feels like it's in one. The curtain down there hasn't moved in years, but it hangs patiently anyway, heavy and dark, folds settled into the shape they've chosen for themselves. Dust clings to it in soft layers, like it's been gently snowing indoors for decades. I imagine the curtain remembers applause better than anyone else here. It felt it first, the vibration, the sudden rush of sound, then the hush. I shift again, slowly. The seat complains quietly beneath me, a small creak that echoes just enough to remind me how empty the place is. No one shushes me. No one turns around. That's one of the perks of arriving late enough. The man with the broom has wandered off somewhere behind the stage. I hear him briefly. A cough, a clatter, a muttered word that sounds more tired than annoyed. Then nothing. I wonder if he's gone to sit somewhere with his own thoughts for a bit. Sweeping can wait. Dust isn't going anywhere. The cat reappears, now on the stage itself. It walks with a careful dignity, stepping around old tape marks that once told performers where to stand. Its paws make no sound at all, which feels unfair considering how much noise humans insist on making just by existing. It pauses center stage, sits and begins washing one paw with intense focus. Whatever grand finales once happened here have clearly made a lasting impression. I lean forward again and rest my elbows on my knees. The opera glasses are still beside me, their lenses catching a bit of light. I pick them up and look through them again. Not at the stage this time, but at the seats. Rows and rows of faces that aren't there anymore. The red fabric looks darker through the glass, almost solemn. Once, these seats would have been filled with people wearing clothes meant for being seen. Stiff collars, layered skirts, shined shoes that pinched by the end of the night. People sat straighter then, or at least pretended to. It's exhausting, pretending. I lower the glasses. Somewhere above, the ceiling answers with another quiet pop. Not a dramatic crack, just a sound like a thought snapping gently into place. A new hairline fracture appears near one of the clouds, drifting off toward the edge. It's subtle, easy to miss if you weren't already watching. I watch. If this place had electricity when it was young, it would have been the sort that flickered when too many lights were on at once. If it was gaslit, there would have been a warmth to the glow that softened everything, even mistakes. People were more forgiving under softer light. The light now is whatever finds its way in through high windows and broken fixtures. It's honest. It doesn't flatter. I realize I've been counting the cracks without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. I lose track somewhere around 7 and decide that's enough effort for today. Intermission, after all, isn't meant to be productive. I settle back into the seat, let my shoulders drop, and listen to the silence stretch itself comfortably around me. No bells ring, no curtain rises, and no one seems bothered by that at all. There are jobs that only exist when no one is watching. I think about that while I sit here. How many people have passed through this opera house after the lights went out for the last time? Not performers, not audiences, the quieter ones, the ones who came in through side doors and stayed long after everyone else had decided the place was finished. Someone had to turn the lights off for the final time. Someone had to lock the doors and keep the key, even if they weren't sure why. Someone came back weeks later, then months later, then only when they remembered to. The building didn't mind. Buildings are patient with memory. I imagine a caretaker in the early morning, hat pulled low, footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty hall. He would have checked the ceiling for leaks, the stage for drafts, the seats for rodents. He might have sat down exactly where I'm sitting now, just for a minute, before remembering he had somewhere else to be. That minute probably mattered more than the rest of the day. The opera house hums faintly. Not with electricity, not with music, but with the soft sound of air moving where it shouldn't. Old buildings never quite seal themselves properly. They leave gaps on purpose, I think. They don't want to feel trapped. Somewhere behind me, a pigeon rustles. I don't turn around. Pigeons prefer to be acknowledged indirectly. It shifts its weight, feathers brushing against stone, and then settles again. I picture it tucked into a nook where a decorative flourish once mattered very much. Now it's just a good place to nap. The cat below has finished washing and lies stretched out on its side, belly exposed, completely trusting the emptiness. It doesn't even flinch when a piece of dust drifts down nearby. This place has earned that trust. If this were the 1930s, there might have been a radio backstage somewhere, crackling softly between performances. News drifting through the halls, weather reports, advertisements spoken too clearly. The opera house would have listened politely and then returned to its own concerns. If it were later, the 1950s perhaps, someone might have tried to modernize it. New lights, new seats, a fresh coat of paint that already knew it wouldn't last. People always think new things will fix old silences. They never do. The silence here isn't broken. It's complete. I adjust my cloak around my shoulders and notice how warm the balcony still feels, despite everything. Thick walls, heavy materials, built to hold sound, yes, but also warmth. Care went into this. A lot of it. More than most people will ever realize. I lean my head back again. The ceiling looks unchanged, or maybe it's changed so slowly that the difference belongs to someone else's lifetime. That seems fair. Not everything has to happen on my schedule. I breathe in, I breathe out. Somewhere far off, a door settles into its frame with a dull thud, as if someone closed it gently and then forgot to leave. No footsteps follow. The building adjusts itself and goes still again. I remain where I am, because some jobs, like watching paint crack, don't need to be finished. I start thinking about where sound goes when it's finished. Not the loud kind, not applause or music or voices raised just enough to feel important. I mean the quieter sounds, the ones that never meant to be remembered in the first place. The clearing of throats before a performance, the rustle of programs folding themselves into shapes they won't keep, the soft gasp someone makes when a note lands exactly right. Those sounds didn't echo the way people expect echoes to work. They didn't bounce around forever. They settled. They found places to sit. If I had to guess, I'd say some of them are still here. The opera house was built for sound to travel. Arches and curves designed to guide it gently, like a careful hand at someone's back. Even now, if I shift just a little, the scrape of fabric against the seat seems louder than it should be. Not sharp, just present. I test it once more, barely moving my weight. Yes. The sound listens. Down on the stage, the cat rolls onto its other side and exhales in a way that feels exaggerated for such a small body. The breath floats upward, barely audible, and disappears somewhere between the seats and the balcony. I imagine it joining a collection of other small noises that never found their way out. Once, singers would have stood exactly where that cat is now. Some nervous, some confident, some pretending to be both. They would have focused on breathing, slow and deep, letting their voices fill the space without forcing it. That takes trust. The opera house knew how to hold a voice without dropping it. I wonder when the last real sound was made here. Not footsteps, not brooms, but something meant to be heard. A final note held just a moment longer than necessary. A delayed clap from someone who didn't want it to end yet. Those are the hardest sounds to leave behind. I adjust my hands on the railing and notice the fine layer of dust clinging to my fingers. It coats everything evenly now, like the building finally decided on one color scheme and committed to it fully. I brush my hands together slowly, watching the particles fall and vanish into the dark. If this place were ever restored, truly restored, someone would have to decide which sounds to bring back. Music, laughter, footsteps, or maybe just the quiet ones, amplified enough to feel intentional. I don't think it would like being crowded again. Some spaces grow into their silence the way others grow into their noise. I sit a little straighter, then relax again. The ceiling gives no reply. The cracks remain patient. The silence stays exactly where it is. And for the first time in a while, I feel like I'm sitting in the right place. I start noticing the seats more than the stage. It happens gradually. One moment I'm watching the ceiling again, and the next I'm counting rows without meaning to. The seats curve around the room in careful arcs, each one angled just slightly differently, as if they're all trying to be polite about sharing the same view. Some of them lean a little to one side. Others sit perfectly straight, still convinced posture matters. The fabric has thinned where people once rested their hands, fingers worrying at the edge during difficult passages of music. I imagine the seats remember weight more than faces, the steady presence of someone settling in, the shift when they leaned forward, the relief when they finally leaned back. Those impressions last longer than applause. A few rows down, one seat is folded up. No one ever came back to lower it. It's been waiting ever since, upright and hopeful, like it's ready for someone who's running late. I almost want to go down and fix it, but that would feel like interrupting something important. Waiting has become its job now. The cat stirs again, stretches, then changes locations with impressive deliberation. It crosses the stage, pauses beneath the balcony, and curls into a new spot that seems no warmer or softer than the last. The change itself appears to be the point. That feels familiar. If this were a matinee long ago, the audience might have been smaller. Families, older patrons, people who preferred daylight and didn't mind being seen enjoying themselves. The opera house would have sounded different then. Lighter somehow. Less expectation hanging in the air. Now the air just hangs. I notice a faint draft moving across the seats, lifting dust in thin, wandering lines. It moves like it knows where it's going, even if it won't explain why. The dust rises, dances briefly, and then settles again, choosing new places to belong. I adjust my posture again, slower this time, careful not to rush the moment. My back rests against the seat. My shoulders drop. My breathing evens out without me asking it to. The ceiling hasn't changed, or maybe it has, just enough to reward patience rather than attention. I stay where I am, letting the opera house continue doing what it does best now, waiting quietly. It's the small movements that start to stand out now, not the obvious ones, not the cat shifting on the stage, nor the dust drifting through the light, but the quieter adjustments. The way the opera house seems to settle itself every so often, like someone easing into a more comfortable position without wanting to wake anyone. There's a soft click somewhere behind the walls, wood responding to temperature, stone remembering it exists. I imagine beams and supports adjusting their weight, sharing it politely, the way they've learned to do over time. I notice my own breathing again. It's slower than it was when I arrived. I don't remember telling it to slow down. It simply did. The way people do when they realize nothing is expected of them, in and out, with a pause in between that doesn't need to be filled. The cat lifts its head, ears flicking once, then lowers it again. Whatever it heard wasn't worth getting up for. That feels like good judgment. If this place were still in use, someone backstage would be whispering right now. There's always whispering just out of sight. Stage managers counting seconds. Performers repeating lines they don't want to forget. Someone asking if the door was locked, even though it always is. Now the only thing that whispers is the air. I shift my foot slightly and the movement sends a soft ripple through the dust on the floor below. It looks like a breath moving across the stage. It fades quickly, leaving no evidence it was ever there. That's how most things move through time. I lean back, letting the seat take more of my weight. The cushion gives a tired sigh, then settles. It's not uncomfortable, just honest. It doesn't try to be more than it is. Above me, the ceiling holds steady. The cracks don't widen. They don't retreat. They simply exist, continuing their quiet work without needing an audience. I realize I've stopped counting chapters in my head, stopped marking time altogether. The opera house doesn't measure it the way people do. It stretches moments until they're wide enough to rest in. I stay, because sometimes the smallest movements are enough. I start wondering when time stopped trying so hard here. Not when the doors closed for the last performance. That was only an ending for people. Buildings don't recognize those as final. They pay more attention to when routines fade, when schedules loosen, when no one checks a watch anymore because there's nothing left to be late for. This feels like one of those places. I glance at the opera glasses again, still resting where I left them. Once, someone would have lifted them with purpose, scanning the stage for details they didn't want to miss. The tilt of a chin, the flutter of a sleeve, the exact moment a singer took a breath before something important. Now they just sit. Time doesn't seem offended by that. If this were the early years of the opera house, rehearsals might have stretched late into the night, candles burning low, voices tired but determined. Someone arguing gently about phrasing while another person nodded without really listening. Time would have been measured in cues then, in entrances, in exits. Now it stretches without needing markers. The cat shifts again, curling tighter into itself, becoming more idea than animal. Its breathing is steady, even. I match it without realizing I'm doing it. In, out. A pause that doesn't belong to anyone. The ceiling cracks catch the light differently now, not brighter. Softer, as if they're learning how to disappear without fully leaving. I trace their paths with my eyes, following each line until it fades into paint that still hasn't decided what it wants to be. I feel the seat beneath me warm slightly. Or maybe I've just stopped noticing the cold. It's hard to tell when comfort sneaks up quietly. Somewhere in the building, something settles again. Not a sound, more like a feeling. The kind that lets you know everything is where it should be. I stay very still, because sometimes time forgets its lines, and the silence knows exactly what to do instead. At some point, I realize I've stopped watching the stage entirely. My attention has drifted back where it started, upward, to the ceiling and its quiet, patient work. The cracks have a way of pulling the eye without asking permission. They don't demand anything. They simply exist, and somehow that feels like a promise being kept. I think ceilings are honest like that. They're built to be impressive at first. Grand, sweeping, painted with clouds and angels and symbols no one fully agrees on. But eventually, they settle into their real purpose, staying overhead, holding things up, asking nothing in return. Gravity never stops negotiating with them, and still they stay. This one has stayed a long time. A tiny flake loosens near the edge of one crack. I watch it hesitate. It clings for just a moment longer than seems necessary, as if finishing a thought. Then it lets go, drifting down in a slow, uncertain spiral. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It lands somewhere I can't quite see and disappears into the layers below. That feels like a good way to go. If this opera house was still hosting performances, someone would be worried about that flake, about liability, about appearances. They'd call someone in, set up scaffolding, paint over the problem, and pretend it never existed. Now the ceiling is allowed to be exactly what it is. I stretch my neck gently, easing the stiffness that comes from looking up too long. The movement makes the seat creak again. The same sound as before, unchanged. That consistency is comforting. Some things don't feel the need to reinvent themselves. The cat hasn't moved in a while. I check just to be sure. Still there. Still breathing. Still committed to the idea that this is a perfectly reasonable place to nap. I wonder how many ceilings it slept under. The air feels thicker now, not heavier, just fuller, as if the space has gathered itself around the moment and decided to stay. My thoughts slow down to match it. They stop lining up. They stop trying to be useful. I let them wander. The cracks don't spread any further. Or maybe they do, but only in ways too small to notice. Either way, the ceiling keeps holding, keeps doing what it was always meant to do. I stay seated, eyes tracing familiar lines that don't mind being looked at again and again. There's no rush. The ceiling has promised as much. I don't notice the moment when I decide not to move. It happens quietly, without ceremony. One moment I'm thinking that I might shift my weight, stretch my legs, do something that resembles an ending. And the next, the thought dissolves before it can finish forming. Staying put feels easier. The opera house seems pleased with that decision, not in any obvious way. No creaks of approval, no settling sighs. Just a subtle sense that nothing here needs adjusting anymore, as if everything has finally lined up the way it prefers. The ceiling above me holds steady, cracks unmoving, angels frozen in their thoughtful hovering. The light from the chandelier glows without flicker, as though it's forgotten that flickering is something lights sometimes do. The air rests against my skin, neither warm nor cold, just present. The cat remains asleep on the stage, a small, unmoving shape that feels more permanent than the curtains behind it. Its breathing is so slow now that I have to remind myself to look closely to notice it. I don't disturb the moment by doing that for long. I let my gaze soften. Once, people would have checked their watches right about now. They would have shifted in their seats, glanced toward exits, calculated how much time they had before the rest of their evening began. Time was always leaning forward back then, eager to move on. Here, it leans back. I realize I can't remember how long I've been sitting. Minutes, maybe, or much longer. The thought doesn't stay long enough to matter. The opera house doesn't seem interested in keeping track, and I find myself agreeing with it. My shoulders sink a little more. My breathing slows just a fraction. The sound of it blends into the room so completely that it feels like part of the building rather than something I'm doing. Nothing new happens. That feels exactly right. I stay where I am, watching the ceiling do what it has always done. Holding, waiting, never asking to be anything else. There's a point, and I don't know exactly when it happens, where even my thoughts slow down enough to stop bumping into one another. They begin to drift instead. One passes by, unimportant. Another follows, equally uninterested in being remembered. I don't try to catch them. I don't try to finish them. They seem relieved by that. The opera house feels fuller now, somehow, even though nothing has been added. No people, no sound. Just presence settling into itself, like dust finally choosing where to land. I notice the warmth in my hands. It's faint at first, easy to mistake for the lingering heat of the room or the simple result of sitting still for a long time. But it grows a little steadier, a little more certain, familiar, without being distracting. I lower my gaze from the ceiling for the first time in a while. In my palm rests the smooth stone. It hums softly. Not loudly enough to pull me away from the moment, just enough to let me know it's there. The glow is gentle, contained, as if it understands this place prefers subtlety. The light doesn't compete with the chandelier, or the dust, or the long shadows. It simply exists alongside them. The opera house doesn't react. No creak, no shift, no protest. If anything, it feels like a nod of understanding. I curl my fingers slightly around the stone, not to hide it, just to hold it the way you hold something that has waited patiently for you to be ready. The hum stays even, calm, unhurried. The cat on the stage doesn't stir. The ceiling remains exactly as it was. Everything holds. The edges of the room soften then, not fading, just loosening their grip. The balcony rail beneath my arms feels lighter. The seat beneath me feels farther away. The air grows quieter, even though it was already quiet to begin with. I take one slow breath, then another. The glow brightens just enough to notice, and then steadies again. The opera house stays behind, whole, quiet, and unoffended. As if it never expected me to do anything else but sit there for a while. And when I finally go, nothing rushes to replace me. There will always be ceilings like this. Places that wait. Places that don't ask to be remembered loudly. I'll find another one soon enough. Another quiet space. Another moment that doesn't need much of anyone. And until then, everything is exactly where it belongs.